Are you exasperated or what? In this podcast series, myself, Tom Fox, and Gregg Greenberg, author of Effing Argentina, explore the current American psyche being overworked, overleveraged, overtired, and overwhelmed. Find out more about America's exasperation with, well, exasperation. In this, the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network, we unpack current exasperations of American life, from debt to PTA to the ubiquitous BFJ. I'm your co-host, Tom Fox.
And I'm Gregg Greenberg, the author of Effing Argentina and 10 More Tales of Exasperation. So this season on Effing Argentina, we're talking about exasperation. So each day it's nearly impossible to complete a full day without lashing out at some object, animate or otherwise, that's causing intense irritation. So in today's episode, we explore exasperation with a tale relating to the American icon, Billy Joel. Tom, take it away.
So, Greg, what is a BFJ or a BFJ-er?
BFJ stands for Billy Effin' Joel, in case you haven't figured it out. And I am not a BFJ fan. I grew up on Long Island, actually in Hicksville, which is where Billy Joel's originally from. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why I have such distaste or disdain for his music. Because when I was growing up in Hicksville, in elementary school and junior high school, they kept making us sing his songs in chorus. They would play it at the mall, and that's how you pronounce it in Hicksville, Long Island, the mall. You just could not escape Billy Joel. It was kind of like in Clockwork Orange when they had Alexander's eyes up on the screen and they were indoctrinating him to cure him of his sociopathic behavior. I just do not like Billy Effin' Joel, and I took it out on him in the story. I'm sorry. I know it's blasphemy. It's heresy when you come from Long Island to say that. I'm putting myself out there, Tom.
But there's another reason to do it in addition to what you've described as a very personal reason. I think he's anathema to any real rocker. Too much show tunes, too much singing, too much of a lot of things that I don't think is rock and roll. Having said all that, he's a piano player, and Elton John's a piano player, and nobody says Elton effing John.
Well, look, Billy and later Elton, you have your early Elton, he rocked a lot. And, you have piano. Warren Zevon was a great rock and roll piano player, and Billy Powell and Leonard Skinner. But the bottom line is Billy Joel gets into schmaltz, which is chicken fat in Yiddish. And it also means very overly dramatic music, maudlin at times. It's just not rock and roll in my view. I know he sings a song, it's still rock and roll to me, but even that song is overly schmaltzy. I just can't take it. So as a Long Island kid growing up in a town known as Oyster Bay, Long Island, I even know the lyrics to his songs, to Billy the Kid, because you could not get away from it. It's like they jabbed it in your arm like a COVID shot. Bottom line is I don't like his music.
So, as usual in your story, you went in a couple of really interesting directions, and I have to give you uber kudos for the Spinoza reference. Perhaps the most difficult philosopher in the history of the world ever to read, but who talks about Spinoza as a character trait or a character deficit, Greg?
Well, this particular person is, just to give you a little bit of background on the story as opposed to just my pure hatred for BFJ, it's a story about a guy who really does not want to date a girl who likes Billy Joel so much. He's in love with this girl, but she has this one terrible character trait, and that's that she loves Billy Joel's music, so much so that she sings it in the shower, plays his videos, she wants to take that boyfriend to a concert. And this is a deal breaker for the guy. He hates Billy Joel that much. So he's trying to reconcile his love for this woman with his hatred for Billy Joel. And it's quite understandable. On the other hand, this guy is obviously nuts. Spinoza is a great Jewish philosopher. So he's really digging deep to try and find ways that he can not break up with this girl over her love for Billy Joel.
So, which Billy Joel song does our protagonist hate the most, Greg?
Probably the schmaltzier ones, the ballads, Just the Way You Are. I'm sure he didn't like We Didn't Start the Fire, which is just a history lesson. I mean, I know them. I had to learn them as a child, and they're all so painful just for me to recollect. Uptown Girl. I mean, the video had Christy Brinkley. I mean, the guy breaks up with Christy Brinkley, or she broke up with him. Either way, what is going on there in terms of beauty and this bestiality with music? So there's a lot of stuff by his I don't like.
So I would have to agree with you on Uptown Girl. But he did rock out one time that I can recall. And I guess I've seen him more than I should probably admit to on this podcast. But I saw him sing back in the USSR in Moscow. And I remember that of being one of the great piano rockers of all time. So even though you had to grow up with him tattooed to your inner ear, could we at least agree he rocked out that time?
But he didn't even write that song. That's a Beatles song. And he was doing it in Russia. And Russia was so backward at the time, they didn't even know what rock and roll was. You know what I mean? So I'm not even going to give him credit for playing back in the USSR over in Russia. No, he didn't bring down the Iron Curtain. No way.
But you see actually a greater evil here, Greg. You see a co-opting and a corruption of the American mind. And that leads to our quote from Richard, our protagonist. How bad has BFJ co-opted and corrupted American mind through his catchy melodies? How bad is it, Greg?
He may be controlling all our brains. This may be a Manchurian candidate situation where he has us all knowing all the lyrics to Piano Man and all his other songs that, at some point he's going to have us do something that we don't want to do. So I'm wary. I'm wary. So try and drain your mind or delete your mind of all those tunes, because I think Billy Joel was trying to control you, Tom. You're scaring me. I may have to break up with you over this podcast that you liked his Russia concert.
So perhaps you could tell us how you were able to break the spell, Greg, having had, actually been vaccinated as a teenager. Is it just sheer force of will or something else?
I don't know if I have. I still know all the lyrics to those terrible songs, but I really have gone out of my way to go to a lot of true rock and roll shows. So as the narrator says, and that is a bit autobiographical, the narrator, he likes the Ramones. That's rock and roll. He likes the Replacements. That's rock and roll. And, of course, the Rolling Stones. Those are the three R's. Forget reading, writing, and arithmetic. The Ramones, the Replacements, and the Rolling Stones, not BFJ.
I can't think of a better way to end this podcast. So thank you for joining us on this episode. I hope you'll join us again on our next episode of Effing Argentina. I'm Tom Fox.
And I'm Gregg Greenberg with a Billy Effin' Joel complex.
Join us again for our next episode where we go nasal to explore the exasperation of a Malador on the number 5 Express.